Welcome to the Present Fathers Podcast. This is the show that focuses on climbing the mountain of fatherhood together. We believe that dads matter. That's why this show is for you. So gear up, dads. Get ready. It's time to start climbing. This episode is brought to you by Pre-Sleep. Hey there, my name is George Hayworth. I'm a husband and father and an entrepreneur. I work out a lot. I like to stay physically fit and active. And one of my secrets for how I stay so healthy and get so much done isn't because I'm some awesome guy. It's because I use Pre-Sleep. Now, this product is one of my personal favorites. It's probably the best supplement in my cabinet, and that is because it's 100% pure and natural. All the ingredients are made right here in the US of A, and the product is based around magnesium, L-theanine, and glycine, and these three work together to help you fall asleep faster and stay asleep longer. And then on top of that, it increases the quality of your sleep. So it is a triple threat when it comes to optimizing your sleep. And my favorite thing about it is that there's no melatonin, so it's not habit forming or anything like that. And there's no sugar whatsoever. So it is super simple to use. You just take one scoop, put it in a glass of water, stir it up down the hatch. I do it about an hour before bedtime, and I sleep great. I have no issues getting to sleep, staying asleep, and I track it on my watch. It tells me how good my sleep quality is, and it is exponentially better when I use my Pre-Sleep. So what are you waiting for? Go check it out. Sign up today, get yourself a tub of this, and you will never look back. Your best sleep is waiting in this bottle of magic right here. Get 10% off at checkout by using the code GEORGE10. That's GEORGE10, or tap the link in the description below. All right, Oscar, welcome to the Present Fathers Podcast, man. I'm really excited to dive into your background. You've got it sounds like you did a lot of things all at once, but you were a lot of time in the NYPD and doing a whole lot there. And then also, I think concurrently, we're also being a personal trainer running your fitness business. So let's dive in, man. Welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate, being a guest in your show. And
yeah,
I tell everyone, when it comes to leading by example, that's what I wanted to do. And that's like with all men. You want to be that pillar, basically, I want to say that rock of Gibraltar of the family. And there's nothing wrong with that. Taking all that and doing anything, just be you. Don't be afraid to be you. That's it.
I love it. All right. Couldn't agree more. So with that, man, I'd love to just fire away with kind of an out-of-the-box question here. What's the craziest thing you saw in service at the NYPD?
There was a plane that crashed recently. A helicopter just crashed in the Hudson recently. That happened. So I want to say about 10 years ago, there was a small plane flying out of Teterboro Airport, and it wound up crashing with a helicopter. And we had to go retrieve all the bodies and everything else out of the water.
Oh, man.
And I remember picking up this thing. It looked like it was a white cap. I don't want to discuss your audience, but it was a white cap. And realizing when I pulled it out of the water, it was one of the people's skulls.
Dang.
And I was like, oh,
Wow.
What do I put that back? I mean, the classic line all cops say is that you can't make some of the stuff up, that what we go through or what we see, the brutality of people, to also just blatant disregard for other people, to the most stupidest things in the world.
Yeah.
I never forget my first arrest or call in Manhattan. I went from being what they call Queens Marines in the borough of Queens into Manhattan, where people are nicer and all that other stuff. They're like, oh, you can't do what you guys do in Queens to people here. Was some guy was like, his dog bit my dog, so I punched him in the face. I'm like, are you kidding me? This is really why you call the cops? Because his dog sniffed at your dog at a dog park? It's like, stories like that just go on. And if you sit with a bunch of local cops from all over the country, they'll tell you everyone has a story, like a crazy story. But that was the more craziest thing when I realized, like, getting an air sea rescue or the scuba team, things are real. I'm like, wow, we get some really, full on stuff to do.
Right.
So that was one of the craziest things, and getting used to that.
Yeah, well, I'd like to just take a moment. I'm in the military, and I feel like we get a little bit more credit than we probably deserve. People are really quick to say thank you for your service. I feel like police don't nearly get enough credit, and I've gone to a lot of kind of events where it's veterans and first responders only, kind of group therapy stuff almost, and just hearing stories from first responders. I'll keep my stuff, right? I think you guys don't get nearly enough credit for the work you're doing day in and day out. And it's a little bit different too, just from a mental load point of view, because it's in your backyard, right? It's happening where you live, and you're seeing that all the time. There's something about deploying overseas somewhere. Okay, well, that happened over there. When I come back home, I'm back home, right? So I just, from one soldier to an officer, I appreciate what you guys do, and we unfortunately haven't had a ton of police on this show yet, so I'm glad you're one of the first. And yeah, so I just wanted to put that plug out there because I feel like it needs to be said more often than it is. Hopefully, the pendulum's shifting back here in this country, that we can restore some of that. But at least the last couple years, I feel like you guys have been put through the ringer. So
Oh
I'll
yeah.
get off my soapbox now.
No need. And again, all military guys. I mean, I had the privilege last year swimming with the SEALs in the
Oh, that's
Hudson,
yeah,
and
that's
they were
cool.
fantastic. I'm very friendly with a lot of them this year. I'm swimming again with Team 62 Romeo, and I
Nice.
have to say that military community, they reached out to all the first responders. Mind you, a lot of people can't do the 3.5 mile swim. you
It's a
know,
long way.
it's a lot for them, but again, all the military guys. The difference is law enforcement and military is that you guys have the threat of imminent death every time. We don't have that.
I
It's
don't know
like,
about that, man. Like every traffic stop.
it's there, but 9 times out of 10, how it used to be that if you killed a cop, you weren't coming back. As in, we would hunt you down, and I know I can't say this, but you will come back in a box. That's how
Yeah.
it used to be. It was like
Right.
it was like how the mob did things. We just,
Mhm.
they didn't whack you. I don't want to say that, but you knew that was a wrong thing to do. It's like depicted in movies.
Right.
You don't kill cops. You don't do this.
Yep.
You don't do that. It's a big no no you know and that's
Yeah.
how it used to be with law enforcement. As we used to say, you got to drop the hammer on people. That's it, and that
Right.
deters them from being bad people, and that was the whole thing. And I'm
Yeah.
sure, like in the military, the guys are like, don't mess with the Marines. Don't mess with the Delta guys, the SEALs, whatever. Every special unit are like, you don't want to mess with Rangers or anything like that. You don't want to deal with that, because once you open up that box, that dragon is coming out, and it's very hard to put that dragon back into that box.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So I mean, a lot
Yep.
to all the men and women in law enforcement as well in military. Remember, a lot of them do come back from military backgrounds. There were a couple of
Right.
guys I worked with on my scuba team who were either a submariner, and he explained exactly what that was. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool, submarine. And another one was a Navy guy, full on under ships and whatnot. And there was one or two ex-SEALs who were on the scuba team who left when I just got on to go on and do other things. But thank you again so much. I have to say, everyone loved the cops during 9/11. I mean, we could
Yeah.
not get enough love. Like, you literally wanted to wear
Yeah.
your uniform everywhere because they were just
Right.
giving you stuff and kisses and
Yeah.
hugs and everything else. It was like the
Yeah.
best time to be a cop.
I wish we could be America on 9/12 again.
Yep.
Right. That was a pretty power. I was just a kid at the time, but still can vividly remember how the country unified. And I've got my daughter interrupting now. So Brandon, I'm going to kick it over to you to start walking through Oscar's background. Let's learn more about your time in the NYPD, because I know that's a huge piece of your career here, and obviously a lot to cover. But tell us how long you've been serving and everything you kind of done there, because I know you said Special Operations Unit too. So love to
So,
learn about that.
so my background is that I was always an athlete. And what was great was that I took that athletic background, and I was a phys ed teacher, and I was doing lifeguarding in the summer. Whatever all teachers do, they have the summers off and do things. So I was kind of figuring out what I was wanted to do, because I got kind of bored of teaching. So I met a Nassau County cop, Richie Wagner, God rest his soul. And he said, hey, Oscar, I know you're kind of in a crossroads. You're kind of sick of teaching. You love lifeguarding. You love this. Why don't you go become an NYPD cop? At that time, Nassau County cops was like the cream of the crop of the country of police. They only take 50 guys every couple of years, and literally guys die from that job. They would not retire because it's such a cushy job. We used to call them squirrel chasers, the highest paid squirrel chasers. No disrespect to all you guys out there in Nassau County. Love you to death. But back in the day, you guys were the king when it came to the upper echelon of law enforcement in the United States. It was nothing better when you went to police week somewhere and the guys would go, dude, Nassau County, oh my God, those guys like to have cop cars made out of gold, you know? Um, so I wound up taking the test. And at that time, I was a lifeguard for about, I want to say, 6 or 7 years. So I got in really great swimming shape and as well off hours, whatnot. So came in, aced the test. It wasn't really that hard. And then I got called in 97. And all cops start out the same thing. You go from the academy 6 months and then you go into the street. And then I wound up working. I said, I want to work, really get to know the job. So I started working in the projects and housing where I really got to see the nitty gritty of New York and,
Yeah.
that underbelly, so to speak, of, a lot of crime. I can't say like tons of crime, but, small, from drugs to, petty theft to burglary to robberies, grand theft auto, things like that, learning really how the job works. And back then also was great because the detectives, they were like old school cowboys. They wore their suits. Some wore jeans and a nice dress shirt, their gun at their side and whatnot. And, the veterans taught you what is really needed. So I went on from that for a couple of years into narcotics. Then I got recruited into Manhattan, and that's when things changed. When I was like, "Wow, this is nice." And I remember, I can't say, tuned up a few guys on the street there in Times Square, and someone going, "You can't do that here." I'm like, "What?" Because it used to work. Is that you tell the bad, low end bad guys, really small little guys, are like, "Take your lickings and go home, or take your lickings and go to jail." And that was the thing. You let them, you gave them a choice. And 9 times out of 10, they were like, no, I just want to go home. And you would tell them, because I learned that from the project guys, you got to leave your shoes. They're like, what? I was like, you got to leave your shoes. And they're like, why? Because it teaches you a lesson. You never mess with a New York City cop. You don't back talk them. And they would leave their shoes and go catch a cab or the subway, whatever it is. And it was a thought. And I'm like, and guys would ask me, why did you do that? And I said, I really don't know because I was kind of taught that way back in the day. So they were like, well, you can't do that now in Manhattan. So I did the whole thing in Manhattan for a little bit. And then my sergeant, who was great, Sergeant Philomena, he was a Navy guy. And he said, Oscar, you got this great background of physical training. Also, I was still a trainer part-time. And he says, this huge aquatic background for you. It's like, you should try for the scuba team. I'm like, what is that? And he's like, it's the elite unit in the NYPD. So there's only 30 guys. That's it. Out of 38,000. Guys try out all the time. They never basically make it. It's a consecutive test. So if you fail one part of the test, you're out. And you have to wait another year to come back and retry again. So that was the whole thing where it was like consistency, consistency, consistency. And I remember it was one point, like in the middle of it, it was like, okay, you got to basically run one mile under 6 minutes and 59 seconds. Anything above that, you're out. If it's 59 and 1 second, you're out. The next thing after that was swimming 20 laps, I think, in 13 minutes. I mean, you're coasting. And then it was scuba skills and all this other stuff. So I remember I trained for it a little bit, not a lot. And I was like, I trained for it like basically like you're training for a test. So I trained specifically for that test, from the push-ups, the pull-ups, and everything else, the runs, all this other stuff. And I aced it. No, not aced it. I was a little worried. There was some great competition there. So out of, I think, 30 or 40 guys, there was only 2 of us that passed. And I was one of the 2. I'm like, okay, cool. And they're like, congratulations. And then I got into a scuba team. And then that's when we really did some serious training. So it was like basically, like James Bond stuff, bomb disposal, doing this, working with the president. I met, Clinton and then Bush and then Obama. And then who was the other one? I think that was it. And then pretty much I retired after that. But it was so cool because the DOD guys will work with us directly. The Secret Service will work with us directly because we're the only ones. If anything happened, since we knew the waterway like the back of our hand and everything. So the Wall Street heliport, when he lands in, like he was the first priority was to go get him. And I was like, I felt bad for all the press corps. I'm like, dude, they go in the water. I'm going to go try and save those people too. I'll throw a little floaty on the president and send them up and everybody else. I can't just let them sit there. So that was the coolest thing because I really got some great training and then meeting different people from different departments throughout the world, through the country. And then, doing dignitary protection, all that other stuff. So it was a lot of fun. And when I retired, it started, getting to the point where it wasn't fun anymore. Like, you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that, you can't do that. Oh, we can't do that. And I'm like, dude, what are we training for? And that was the whole thing where, they kind of took the fun out of life. And that's when most cops always have this one saying: when you don't have any fun anymore, that's when you know it's time to go. So that's how I became a scuba cop.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, I guess I just don't really live in an area where that's probably a very big thing, right? Obviously, New York's on the water and everything, but um, yeah, I would imagine that's some pretty intense training because as soon as you involve scuba, just physically, it's already that much harder, and then having to go down in the murky water and find things and stuff, that must be pretty challenging. So that's definitely a pretty cool job there. Brandon, did you have a question?
Yeah, so for all the chaos that you deal with, like you carry a weight, a certain weight with, your city's chaos. So what's the toughest part about shedding that stress off as you walk through the front door with your family?
It's sharing the fun part, about it. The good things that you do, that you try and convey about there's good people in the world who really truly need help. And every cop has a good story about that, where I really made a difference. I really helped someone. I did my best. Like, there are a couple of times when, I remember in the 7th precinct, we were loaned out when I was a beat cop, and we went down to the 7th precinct. I was in the 10th, that's Chelsea. So basically the 7th is on the Lower East Side. Remember that show Third Watch? It was like
Yeah.
police, fire, and whatnot, and EMS together. So the closest precinct to that is basically that, the 7th, because right next to it is a firehouse and an ambulance
Okay.
corps, the FDNY. So they're usually very busy in that area. It's like part of Alphabet City, everything else. It's a very seedy kind of a low-income neighborhood kind of a thing, mixed with some really nice townhouses there and whatnot. It was this one woman who some punk kid came and threw her on the ground, kicked her in the head, and stole her pocketbook. And it just got to me so bad. I remember I spent the entire tour trying to find this kid. I mean, I was just tossing everybody looking for this kid. And that's the one thing where she was so thankful that I found her pocketbook. It was in a garbage can, after going around, found it. She was just thankful that I really cared. And that's what really got to me, that I'm like, that's my job. That's what I wanted. I wanted to make her feel safe again or whole again. And I felt so bad for her that, the kid stole $10 from her and then humiliating, roughing her up a little bit for no reason. But I mean, trust me, that I got that kid would have got a serious beating.
Wow. So the big thing I want to do is I want to try to extract from your lens or your experience some advice for dads that they can just really utilize. And I know that you've come through a lot of high pressure stuff in your job, right? So what kind of, or what one piece of advice would you give to a father who's got a high pressure job like you, that's pulling him away from kind of being present or patient as a dad, more than he wants to be? What would be that advice that you would give him?
Take that extra time every morning, every night, to tell your kids you love them. Same with your wife and your family. But more so, try and find and be honest with your kids and your family that when you say you're going to do something and be there, do it, no matter what's going to happen. Make that time for your family, because they're the ones who always have your back more than anything else. And, that is a big problem with a lot of cops, because we take a lot of stuff home with us and we keep it inside. We don't share. There's certain things you don't want to share that's a little too graphic, or, um, nerve wracking, or whatever you want to say, very uneasy. But that's a whole thing. A lot of, don't be afraid to share and say things, because as cops, we have a saying that when you're doing 4 to 4 tours, that means you work at 4 in the afternoon and you're not leaving till 4 in the morning. Technically, you get off at 11:30 and then you go to the bar. So you spend the next couple hours, instead of you going home, you're at the bar trying to unwind and whatnot. And that shows a bad pattern, because you should be able to go home, share things with your wife, your brother, whoever it is. You need to get things out. And that's a big thing where a lot of cops don't be afraid to say, hey, I need someone just to talk to. And that's a whole thing. That's what your mates are for, your friends are for. And your wife, she's your best friend. She's with you every day, at your side, no matter, at your worst. Remember that when you get old, that person's going to take care of you. And vice versa, the same thing. Your kids, the same thing. They're going to remember that, hopefully, as they get older. But, that's the one advice I'll say. When you have your family, keep your family as core. Keep it together. be honest with them and just spend as much time as you can with them. That's all.
I love that. I love that. It's so good.
You mentioned, you need to be able to decompress and share things, with the right people. Obviously, you don't want to burden your family with, whether you're police, military, really stressful type of jobs or things where it's, maybe not the greatest of things to bring up with your wife, right? You need to have a circle of guys that you can kind of pour out on and kind of, let go of the burden. But I remember just from my military time on active duty, I felt that there would be consequences if I did that with my military brothers. I'm not sure how it is on in the police force, but I would imagine it's a little bit of the same kind of idea there, where you got to kind of wear this facade of being tough all the time and things like that. And
Correct.
I've noticed that even in what I would call like maybe civilian circles, right, guys who aren't in some form of service like that, there's still this kind of idea that if you pull your buddy aside and be like, hey man, I'm really not doing too good, that there's going to be like massive consequences to that. And as I've matured and as I've grown, just in all walks of life, I've found that that couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, most guys are actually going to be honored by the fact that you pull them aside and be like, hey man, like you're the one guy I trust to share this with. Can you help me? Because it inherently honors him. And I'm just kind of wondering if you've maybe seen that play out better in your circles, and if you've found ways that works. Obviously, I have my thoughts on it, but would just love to kind of pull that a little bit more, because I think this is something that most modern men are really struggling with, regardless of their profession. They're just kind of like bottling it all up by themselves, and there's no one they can feel they can really lay it out to. And I'm not talking about like therapy. I'm talking about like other brothers that you respect and trust and can actually be that for you. But I would love to just get a little bit more of your insight on that.
Yeah, that's a very good subject to bring up, because it's like a faux pas or a really bad thing to say. If you, again, you took that Superman chest and cape off for 1 minute because everyone sees you as that. So in the NYPD, it is frowned upon if you show that you're weak. And then that's the whole thing. It just shows everyone else is that you're weak. But, oh, what, you can't take that kind of stuff. So when you do anything within the department, like there's a thing, I think it used to be called COPE. And it was like, basically, I want to say that it was not part of the department, but it was.
Mm.
Hey, there's something wrong with this guy, because you guys all heard the term the rubber gun squad. So what would
Okay.
happen is that
Yeah.
they would label you that you're uneasy, you have maybe a psychological thing or whatever. So what they would do is called modify you. That means they will put you on a desk. And it's insulting to someone who is a good cop, but maybe they have problems at home. They have a couple other things going on and whatnot. And it's basically, as we say, you don't victimize the victim. And that's the only thing. That person just needs someone to talk to. So they were trying to find all these different outreach programs for cops to go to. Just first responders in general. And it was very hard to find like certain groups. And I always told everyone, when I was in school, in my junior year in high school, I went to a Catholic school, and I remember hanging out with a bad crowd, cutting school, running around, doing this. I never smoked cigarettes, never did anything, crazy like that. But just like, oh, let's go. I'm going to be the cool kid and hang out. Long story short, the dean, Father Joe, came to me and he said, hey, Oscar, how you doing? I noticed you've been cutting school a lot and whatnot. You haven't been showing up. And I was like, yeah, I'm hanging out with these guys. They seem really cool and whatnot. And he said, Oscar, let me explain something to you. These people that you hang around with, they're laughing at you, not laughing with you. They're going to move forward, and you're going to stay in the same spot you're in. And I said, I want you to think about that. To this day, I always think of him as that mentor that I needed, because I grew up with a single mom. She worked 3 jobs, supermarket, checkout girl, all this other stuff. I have 2 other older brothers, same with us. This is back in the 70s. So things were hard, trying to, get that masculinity, leadership and learning right from wrong. And then my Southern Baptist grandmother, God rest her soul, basically taught me to be, patient, kind, things like that. And I remember Father Joe, and that was a whole thing where I wasn't a great Catholic, but when I needed something or someone to talk to, I went to him, and that was a whole thing which, totally changed my life around that. And that's the same thing. If you are part of a parish or a church group, whatever, go and just pull someone aside and talk to them. some cops do pull me aside when I remember back in the day, and they seem like I got everything together, and I would turn around and tell them, dude, that job nearly killed me. I was bawling my eyes out with that kid and whatnot, or that murder, that murder scene or whatever it is. They're like, and once you do that, they show that we're all human, and then we start to talk just like how we are now, just sharing stories, and you feel better once you get that off your chest. And now they're like, okay, that bothered you too. Great. We don't have to, like you said, put this whole facade or the shield on, like, oh, that didn't bother me. It's okay. So
Yeah.
a lot of guys, besides having a group themselves, not at the bar, park,
Right.
somewhere else, a restaurant, whatever it is, get out of the bar scene. Even athletics. I tell guys, go out and be athletic. Get that energy out. Get something
Absolutely.
positive.
Yeah.
Reading a book or things like that, with a group and discussing that. I mean, communication is just a simple key. As I explain to everyone, when you go to disputes and whatnot, they're like, communication is simple. You talk, I listen. I talk, you listen. That's it. We're looking for a compromise. And you feel so much better when you get that off your chest. There's nothing worse when I used to hold a lot of things in and I had to learn, let it out, because it'll take one thing. I never forget. I nearly beat the crap out of some guy for, what did he do? It was like somewhere outside Madison Square Garden or whatever it is. He wound up smacking this, young girl, some idiot. And I mean, I really, I went to town on this guy. Just all that anger comes out of like whatever I was going through at that time or whatever I was dealing with. And another cop saw me at that, and he remember him grabbing me, and he was like, literally put me in a full-on chokehold to say, "Cut it out," whatever, kind of a thing. So I believe that truly that a lot of guys talking to their mates, talking to their friends, talking to their family, like there's certain things you can and cannot share with your wife. Again, you don't want them to see in a different light. And it was funny because my wife met my old narcotics team, and there was only four of us, and we had an unmarked cab and everything else. And she loved the guys in my team and my old sergeant. It's like, you guys were real guys, real men, And they would all say, when I've worked with your husband, my God, we always got in a fight. I just always got in a fight, beating this whatever. And I told her, and she's like, I wanted to see. I was like, I never want you to see me that way because I never want you to be afraid of me. And I told her honestly, I said, everyone I beat up deserved it. Okay. They had a choice and they picked the wrong choice to go,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like my classic line, one quick thing, my classic line in car stops was when people were just belligerent or idiot. And I said, I'm going to reenact your birth by pulling you out through that window. And it ain't going to be pretty.
I was going to say your wife is clearly a great source of person that you can confide in outside of brotherhood. So I would love to hear like maybe a moment where your wife saw how the job was taking a toll on you, and maybe you can like tell us how her perspective helped you grow as a man or as a husband.
Yeah, that's really, my wife is my best friend. She knows when I get frustrated, angry, and she's like, go swim, go work out, go do this. She knows exactly what I need to do. When the U.S. Airway flight landed in the Hudson, our team was called, we came in, and it was freezing. I mean, it was like below zero. There were ice sheets floating down the Hudson, and I was gone for about 2 or 3 days. And I remember coming back home, I was literally blue. I was like, because we're in the water, out of the water, in the water, out of the water, couldn't get warm. And she's like, you're okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm just numb completely. And she drew me a nice warm bath, sat me in, put in some oils and stuff like that, put in some like cool music, whatever. And she just basically eased me through things. And that's what, your spouse does, your friends do. They ease you. They know what you need. Exactly. And that's the whole thing. That's what, I tell everyone, you want to marry your best friend. And the way you become best friends, yeah, you're going to argue, you're going to bicker, have things, but you learn about each other that way.
Yeah.
And that's what my wife did for me. And, 17 years later, we're still together. We're still, not madly in love, but, in love with each other, respect each other's space, kind of thing. And that's the whole thing where when you're in a relationship, you want to make sure you keep that relationship, do your part, do the work in the relationship, figure things out. Don't hold things back. The biggest thing I tell everyone, honesty is the key. Be honest. That's all you have to do. Be honest. Simple as that.
Yep. What a great example of, so I do a lot of, as talk about masculinity a lot and kind of coaching the guys and stuff, but I'll occasionally have women ask like, well, what's the best thing I can do for my husband or something like that? And what your wife did there with the bat, like that's the perfect example, right? What husbands crave is that soft feminine touch, right? We go do battle with the world. We want to come home and have that, like my wife will just gently touch my neck sometimes, and it's like this healing power comes over me, just like all my problems melt away in that moment. And it's that softness that we get at home, right? So to the ladies out there, if you're listening, that's a great example that Oscar's wife gave you there on how to kind of take care of your husband. But I do want to circle back too with the brotherhood thing there a little bit too, because for on the receiving end of it, right? If someone comes to you as a man and says like, "Hey man, I'm really struggling with this thing," I think we as an American culture are pretty inept at dealing with empathy. I think we're really good at sympathy, not empathy. And so sympathy is more like, "Ooh, man, that sounds terrible, but take that over there. I don't want to deal with that." Empathy is like, "Hey, man, let me sit in that with you," right? And what I've found to be very helpful, and Brandon here, my brother, is a great example of this because I call him all the time and have been doing it for years when I'm really not doing great. And he'll just listen, man. He doesn't give advice or anything. Like eventually he will when I've spewed it all out and stuff, but he's just there to listen. And that's where to start, guys. So like if someone comes to you and has something that they're struggling with, you may have to tease it out a little bit, but just hold the space. You don't even have to say anything. You just be like, "Hey man, I'm here." That's it. Like
that's absolutely correct, because that's the whole thing where sometimes people don't want you to find answers for them. They just want to get it off their chest. And then once they put it out there, it's real easy for them to go, "Okay, here's a simple trick when you are in college and you're learning about child psychology. You know what the easiest way for someone to talk to you is like you give them a piece of paper and a pencil or whatever it is, and it said, I want you to draw a person. Then you draw that person, then I want you to describe who that person is." They're actually describing themselves to you and drawing what they think or how they see themselves. That tells you right away where they're at and what they're doing. So if they grow this big monster or whatever it is or things like that, and that's child psychology 101. And that's the same thing with people today, that they just want someone to listen to them, just want someone to talk to and stuff like that. And you're like, "Okay, no problem." And like you said, that's empathy. Empathy is the fact that I'm learning what you're going through. I'm trying to feel exactly, either I have a past experience similar to yours, or I'm trying to put myself literally in your place where you are right now. And just, sometimes, as we always go, just hug it out, bro. Just hug it out, You get in fights, you get this thing like, "Okay, let's hug it out." That's all. All right.
right.
And you move on and you grow from that. Trust me, many of my team members and I had we're all a bunch of alphas. You put a bunch of alphas together, they're going to try and eat each other and kill each other. And we've had that where it's like, okay. And I used to tell guys, let's go to 34th Street, the heliport, it's all fenced in. We take our gun belts off and we go at it. As simple as that. And and they're like, "I'm not fighting you." I'm like, "No, that's how things are solved." And that's a manly thing. It's just a simple thing. It's like, I'm not looking to hurt you. I'm getting all this aggression out. And you always feel better. Like, you guys are brothers. How many times did you guys fight around? Play fight, run around, stuff like that. And then you felt better. It bonded you even more than anything else. As a family, as a unit, and that's the key thing.
Yep. Brandon, do you have something? Sorry, I didn't want to
Yeah, no, I was thinking about the psychology part because, I feel like every person should have psychological training before they start any job, but most especially police officers, because that emotional intelligence and that regulation are so critical. And even with like your scuba missions, right? You're required to have a certain amount of focus under extreme pressure, right? So, what is one mental or emotional tool that you learned through these studies or through your experience that you use now to stay grounded, like when you're with your wife or with your family?
I want to say just, that whole honesty thing, just being yourself, being who you are.
Okay.
Like, it's funny, my wife describes to people what I used to do, and they couldn't understand it. It's like, well, just think of James Bond. All right, doing this, doing that, blowing stuff up, jumping out of helicopters, rappelling down, all the cool stuff. And, she keeps me grounded that way because I don't think about it. I'm like, "Oh, no, whatever I did was nothing." She's like, "You're really modest about it." It's like you in the military, you're modest about things because you're not trying to brag to anybody. Or like, I don't want to be so like I'm the cool guy. It's like, that's the one thing. Like, you don't have to be cool. You know you're cool. That's it. And that's the one thing, like what she does, she keeps me grounded completely. And what I learned from that is to accept that. Not to be like, I don't have to be the manly thing. It's funny because she told me before, if some screaming liberal Karen got in her face, she's like, please allow me to hit her. And I'm like, no, I don't want you to get hurt. She's like, no, let me beat the crap out of her. All right. I need to get that. I'm like, okay, then.
That's
Let me
most New
step back.
York.
You do your thing.
That sounds extremely New York.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That last sentence there was awesome. Yeah, man, it's important to just kind of stay humble, stay honest. Yeah, for sure. That's a great tool. And I know that you like at the beginning here, you're talking about how you're a real big fan of masculinity and kind of like what happened to our values and things like that. And I would imagine that through your years in the NYPD, you kind of saw that happening in real time, like on the ground level, right? So, what do you think, just from your point of view, we need to get back to some of these basics that you believe in, that you were raised in? And I know you said you were raised without a dad, right? And so you kind of had to learn it
Correct.
the hard way. But some of we were talking backstage before we started recording, some of these fundamental, just basics that aren't even necessarily about like chivalry or anything. It's kind of just common courtesies. But what are some of the things that you believe are the core tenets men need to really hone in on and kind of get back to some of these fundamentals, whether it's for themselves, for their own self-respect, for their families, right? Just in general. I'd love your perspective on that.
First off is that a woman's a woman. Always treat a lady like a lady. Someone said something the other day, because ever since I've been with my wife, I always open the car door for her and let her get in the car, then close the door. Everyone always notices that no matter
I'd
what,
be the
where we
same.
are.
Yep. Be
And
charming.
I said, when I stop doing that, that means there's something seriously wrong with me, as in the relationship. The other thing is also for men, don't be afraid to lead. Don't be afraid to lead. Simple as that. If something's going on or whatever it is, don't be afraid to intervene. I hate when people, they're on their cell phones. They're like, oh, let me video it. Oh, that's not my problem. That is. Step in, be a man. Hey, cut it out. Enough. You guys move on. Don't be afraid to be. I'm a man. And I'm going to beat the crap out of you if I need to
Yeah.
to get that point across.
Yep.
But more so than anything else, in all seriousness, just proper manners. That's it. Excuse me. Good afternoon, good morning. I tell everyone, a smile goes a million miles. So when you smile at someone, they're going to smile back at you. If they don't, we'll say New Yorker, go punch them in the face and get it out of the way. But
Yeah.
no, it's just, you be nice. Just be courteous to people. My favorite line in the original War Roadhouse movie, when Patrick Swayze said, just be nice. Ask them to leave. They don't want to leave, walk them out. Just be nice. They get in your face, just be nice. And when the point is not to be nice anymore. But that's the whole thing. I think people, as in men, like there was the Boy Scouts, teaching men to be men. How many guys today don't know how to change a simple car tire, put oil in a car, basic common sense, how to light a fire, how to just do basic survival skills, know which side is north or south, who can read a map anymore. If their phones went dead, I'm going to say half the population on the planet, male, is going to be lost completely. Like, what do we do? Go back to your basics of just simple common courtesy. And I think that is going to start to stem the tide, because I'm starting to see a little bit more of the masculinity coming out. Be a leader, be a man. Don't be afraid of being a man, And I think that's also the same thing, professional appearance. If you want to be treated as a professional, you have to have that appearance. Like I tell everyone, when I fly, I wear a business jacket, no matter what. If it's jeans, whatever, I make sure I'm not wearing sweats. I'm like, you're at the airport. When I was a kid, we all had our little suits, our little suit jackets, stuff like that. And you're like, oh, I'm a businessman today. I'm going to the plane or whatever. You were so happy. And I'm sure if your kids, the same thing. You're like, nope, we're getting dressed like you're going to church. Like, you look presentable. And I think a lot of that's going to start to come back a little bit more, because people are tired of everyone looking like slobs and acting like, excuse me if I can say this, jackasses.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, enough of the nonsense. So I truly believe the core values, simple thing, be respectful to other people, as people should be respectful back to you, and be the better man. If someone gets in your face, you walk away from them, whatever it is, don't even deal with them. Once they put their hands on you, do what you need to do. As I always say, put you over my knee and spank you like a baby. That's it.
That's great. And also with the appearance is not just your clothes, it's your physical fitness, right? it's not everything, but it's not nothing either. And man, I can't stress it enough how, as a man, we are just physical creatures. It is ingrained in us. Even if you're not some huge macho jock, right? You are still a physical being. Even if you're a pretty small guy, there is something about physical activity that, as men, teaches us a lot about ourselves. It builds self-confidence. You carry yourself differently. And then to your point too about having to step in to lead, you're going to have a lot more confidence. You're going to have more presence, so that your presence actually does diffuse situations where you don't have to lay hands on people. You can just step in and say, "Hey, that stops now." And I believe that, go back and look at speeches that Theodore Roosevelt gave to high school graduates in the early 1900s, and he was challenging them to intervene, to be a good citizen as a man in America. It demanded that if you saw something inappropriate happening in public, you went and diffused the situation. He literally said this to high schoolers. So, I don't know where we drifted so far off course, but I believe that obviously don't jump into a situation you aren't equipped to handle, but men should be looking to handle situations as just your duty. I think it's a responsibility we have, because that's why we're designed the way we are. And so I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think that culturally is where, this country has definitely gone off the rails in a lot of ways, is just men are just paralyzed by inaction. And by just simply stepping up, doing a few fundamentals, you can make a world of good. Maybe you won't even see the ripple effects, but you can certainly make someone's day or week simply by just a little bit of your presence. So love that, man.
Right. Well, I learned basically using my voice. I could drop it down a couple of octaves, and right away I have a very commanding voice, as my wife says, and my other partners, when I would tell people, stern, commanding voice, and everyone would kind of shake. And men also, we do, as we size each other up. Like right away, guys will see me and you're like, you don't want to mess with that cop. You don't want to mess with that guy. Look at the size of him. And I'm not a really big guy, but they're like, that guy doesn't sit around and eat donuts all day. That guy looks like he's really in shape. And it's funny because I always get that, and I'm sure you guys get it too. You're walking down the street, and my wife always asks, "Why do guys go like this to you, Oscar?" Like, "Hey, what's up? Yeah, what's up?" kind of a thing. And I said, that's when guys acknowledge someone else, and like, that guy might be tougher than me, kind of a thing. Or I want that guy on my side if something goes wrong. Or I'm like, hey, I do know that guy. One of the things.
Yeah, there's actually some really cool psychology behind that. So like when you look, you do the kind of sup, you're exposing your neck, so you're showing trust in that person. Something about them just rings trustworthy. And when you kind of do the nod downward, that's distrust. That's there's this kind of I guess warning sign coming up in your subconscious. So it's super interesting, because like if I ever nod down, I'm like, wait a minute, what was the red flag? Why did I nod down at that person, right? But I think that might be a little bit of cynicism just from the past too. So, but speaking of cynicism, you've seen a lot of humanity's darkest corners. So, how should we teach our kids about right and wrong, but like still giving them hope, right? Because there's a lot of things that are troubling kids these days, and then they've also got stuff that's pulling their attention, like social media and all these other things. So how would you kind of distinguish right and wrong? Because clearly you've seen a lot of the darker sides on the job.
It's funny you bring that up, because I was taking the train the other day from the city, and there was this older man with a young minority boy. I don't know if we could say that, African American or whatever, black kid there. And he was staring at me. And I was like, okay, just sitting in a train. And the father was talking, or uncle was talking to him. And before he got off the train, he came up and gave me a wave and like a high five. And I have no idea why. And I think he just saw me as like, here's this strong, whatever, put together gentleman, stuff like sitting across the train. So I think kids, the younger generation, is seeing that as in father figures or manly figures, as like, I want to be this guy. Like how we said, idolize astronauts or police officers when we were kids, things like that. Where younger generation, I think, is seeing that stronger masculinity, of men. So for families, with their kids, I think parents, you need to intervene with your kids. First of all, like you touched about social media. We want you to stop looking at this and all this other nonsense, whatever it is, and the bullying, all the nonsense, and, put your phone down, get outside and play a little bit more. The other thing is teaching kids simple right from wrong. Stealing is wrong. Drugs are bad. There's no, things like that. Just the basic common sense of things like, hey, if this kid's telling you to go do something, maybe that guy's not really your friend. Just telling them that basically, I'm here for you as your dad. Whether you want to listen to me or not, that's up to you. But I'm here to protect you from even you. And that's the whole thing, having that conversation with your kids. And I notice a lot of parents kind of stepped up. Like I have a young couple and they have 3 kids. And I tell the mom, her name is Katie. I was like, you're the mother of the year. She gives everything to the kids, does everything with yours. And the dad works, the classic thing, have the weekends together and whatnot on the beach and everything else. And I'm like, that's a real true core family. They're there for their kids all the time. He's active, it's 1 boy and 2 girls, and he's in sports and whatnot. And it was funny because he loved my hook, and I said I got it in Hawaii, and he loved it so much. And I said it was given me by like a shaman or like a Hawaiian whatever priest. And I went and got him one, and it's bigger than he is. And I said I got it from him, and it's Maori from the Pacific Island, culture and whatnot. And it stands for provider. Each one stands for a different thing. This one stands for provider, and I know he likes to surf and swim and all this other stuff. And I got him, and he was so happy that I said, ask your parents first if you can have it, and I'll get you one. And he was just so happy about that, where the littlest things in the world is like, hey, that's someone cool that I want to idolize or be with. Because I remember him seeing me in my cop outfit and whatnot, and, diving gear, going to the beach and whatnot. And it's just that whole thing where kids are looking for people to look up to. And that's the whole thing. It starts from the parents to outside of that. And remember, someone said it before, parents are like superheroes to kids, and that's a real thing where I think we need to get back to by intervening. You're not your kid's best friend. You're the parent.
Yep.
Be the parent. They're going to hate you. It's okay.
Yep.
They'll grow out of it. My classic line, I never forget, my mom would tell me, stop crying. I want to give you something really to cry about. Like, okay. And my mom had to play that role of, the mom and the dad. And growing, God rest her, she raised us right, because none of us are in jail. None of us did, stupid things, whatever. And that was the whole thing. When you did something wrong, you didn't want to shame the family. You didn't want to be that person. So when you bring your kids up and you teach them, just even if it's once a week, just about, this is wrong. Don't do that. If you see an old woman, help her across the street. Don't be afraid of that. Let anyone make fun of whatever you want to say. Be who you want to be. You want to be that strong pillar of a man in yourself as you grow up, as an older or younger man.
Right? So, yeah, man, I love that you said that. You said at the beginning, actually, lead by example, and that's a really huge piece of teaching right and wrong, is actually living it. So to all the dads, that's priority number 1, is just practice what you preach. Like they're learning more by watching than listening to what you say. So leading by example is critical. But to all the men who aren't dads, maybe you're an uncle, maybe you're the neighbor, maybe, you can be that father figure, that superhero figure. And even if the kid has a great dad, there's never a downside to more positive masculine influence for kids, right? Whether they're daughters
Correct.
or sons. I have nieces and nephews, and I try and spend time with both of them and be that example. Uncle George, it's not just about your role as a dad. So, men listening to this, like we were alluding to earlier about intervening and stepping in, this is one of the ways you do it too, is whatever the kid's situation is, just being that positive example of what men should be will give them an example that they will learn a lot from, even if you don't have huge, deep conversations with them, right? It'll be someone that they look up to. And, I'll just kind of speak from anecdotally personal here. My wife, grew up without a dad too for most of her life, and her uncle was a huge figure in her life and continues to be to this day. And that was someone that she looked up to and helped train her and kind of what to expect out of men and things like that. So you don't have to be a dad listening to this to actually make that positive impact that Oscar was just talking about. You can absolutely play that role if you're willing to kind of look outside yourself and be prepared to help others, right? So I think the things that you were talking about early on with those basic courtesies and stuff like that, that's the great kind of window into seeing into someone else's life a little bit when you have those touch points with them to kind of know, like, ooh, maybe maybe they're not doing so good. Maybe I should check in on them, right? That it really doesn't cost you that much to take 5 minutes and see how someone's doing. And that's one of the presence that we were talking about that a man can bring to anyone's life, really. That's very positive, but with kids specifically. So I don't know
Correct.
if you have anything else to add on that point, but
Yeah,
I
I
just want to make
do
it clear it's not
actually.
just for the dads, right? Men can play a positive role for kids, period.
Correct. That was the only thing. My coaches became like that of
Mm,
my dad,
yeah.
and I never forget like Father Joe, stuff like that. Mr. Lamati, Frank Hunter, a lot of guys who influenced me into being a better man from a young man to saying you want to do this, this, and this, and going to them for guidance where your coaches stepped in and basically were that father figure because you wanted to do your best on the field or whatever practice and whatnot, and you would listen to them. And it was funny because they kind of fell into that father figure once they know, like, oh, Smith there doesn't have a dad. He comes here, his grandmother drops him off at football practice, and he runs back home. And they were like, "No, I'll drive you back home." And I had more. I'm like, "No, no, it's okay. I'll take the bus or I'll run home." And they're like, "No, get in the car now." Kind of like take that charge. And they're like, "Okay, make sure you did this, do that." And you would ask them questions, and that's a whole thing where I feel sports had that great impact on kids. And we need to get back to sports where they were like, I'm going to make sure I don't do drugs. I'm not alcohol. I'm not smoking, whatever, because it's going to affect the way I play. Also, I don't want to let my team down. It develops unity. All different races bond together like the movie Remember the Titans. No
Yep.
color is like, we're here to win as a team. Doesn't matter what color you are and things like that. And I said that to someone before. Jobs are that way, like a team. You have all different people. Let's take the military in particular. You have all different people in one unit. Say, we're a team. We have to act and grow as a team. Squash everything, put everything else down. And it changes your mind and perspective of things. And I think for a lot of single mothers who are raising kids, God bless you. Because being like how I grew up and everything else like that in the 70s, it's hard. And, with a lot of single mothers out there, I give them so much credit for trying to step in to be the dad, to do this, whatever it is. And like you said, having an uncle, and I didn't have any uncles. My father was a jerk. He was a total, just ran out on my mom, drug addict, alcoholic, everything. I mean, everything you can think of, the bad things that I never forget when he died and he asked to see me. And I was like, nope, have a great death. I'll see you later because you abandoned my mom and me when I was 3 years old and you didn't care. You didn't care at all. So it was like, you made your bed, you got to lay in it. And that's the kind of person you are. So I don't want to deal with you. And that's another thing where your parents teach you good and bad. People who are bad, you don't want to hang out with because they're going to drag you down. I tell
Yeah.
everyone a simple analogy is try swimming in the ocean with an anchor tied at your feet. That's what bad people do. So you just
Yep.
keep that in your head. So,
Yeah.
like what we were discussing before, being a parent, it's a hard job. And you're going to have your kids hate you and everything else like that. But that's part of being a parent. There's no book, there's nothing in, go to your grandparents, go to your uncles. If you don't know how to be a parent, don't be afraid to ask. Hey, I need some help. What do I need to do? Same thing. Hey, this
Yeah.
isn't working for me. What do I need to do? And you went to your grandmother or your
Right.
grandfather, like, what do I do now?
Yeah, well, the truth is, no one knows how to be a parent when you become a
Correct.
parent, right? And it's yeah, I see this with men specifically, right? We'll pay to get a coach or a mentor or whatever for basically anything in life except for becoming a husband and a father. And
Yep.
the two jobs that are the hardest to master and require the most amount of help is husband and father, right? And
Correct.
um, you know, yeah, if you're a newer parent or about to be a parent or want to be, the best time to learn is now. And no one has it all figured out. If anyone claims that they have parenting completely figured out, they're a liar or they don't have kids. And the truth is, by back to the vulnerability, back to the honesty, just sharing that out with other people that are parents or a little bit ahead of you along the path, right? They'll know a lot better. They've been there, done that. There's no need to pretend like you have to have it all figured out. And in fact, you know, you'll realize very quickly that everyone's just trying to figure it out one day at a time.
Correct.
And that's kind of the beauty of it. That's what makes it all worth it and fun. But I think you were also you were kind of touching on it, and I think maybe we went a little down another path, was the importance of shame as kind of a motivator, right? And when I'm not talking about like the shame of like despair type shame, but more of a shaming the family name. You said that earlier, or shaming your team, right? This is something that's been lost today. And I think as men, there should be a culture of shame that we hold each other to. Not to like, oh, you failed, I'm going to beat you down now. It's more of like, hey, man, you're outside the code. You need to get back to the code to be, reintegrated back to the team, right? Are you willing to, accept the rebuke of your brothers to rejoin us? Yes, I am. Okay, let's get to work, right? That seems very uncommon nowadays, even in the military. I'm sure you saw it in the NYPD. It just felt like you used to feel immediate consequences from a shame point of view if you weren't living up to the standard. And that has just been completely degraded across society, in my opinion. And it's insane because I think as men, we should hold the standard, again, not to lord over and like oppress others, but it's more like, no, this is what we all said we're going to live to, right? You want to be on this team, you want to be a part of this business, you want to be a part of this family. This is what we believe in. These are our core values. And if you're not living up to those, there will be consequences, right? And we're not going to hate you, but we're not going to accept it either, right? It's called the boundary. I think that's a critical piece, especially with raising kids. They should learn that we don't want to shame the family name. Like your last name should mean something. And if you come from a family line where, maybe like your background, right? I'm sure you weren't exactly proud of your family name initially, but you get to rewrite the new story in your
Correct.
generation, right?
Absolutely
And
correct.
so, I think that that's a huge piece of raising strong families is as men setting those core values and then kind of having a little bit of shame associated with not meeting those core values. And it applies to you too, right? If you mess it up, you can
Yeah.
be called out as well. But that's a very powerful thing as humans that we try to pretend is somehow not, oh, that's like, not inclusive or something. It's like, well, no, of course, we're not going to include someone who is breaking the honor of this group of trust, whether it's a family or a team or a business. So I'll
Yeah.
get off my soapbox here, but
No, your
that's
soapbox.
something that I'm really passionate about because it's so obvious once you see how it actually benefits everyone. Because everyone now has to live to that higher standard, and it's not any
Correct.
one person is better than anyone else. It's more of a when someone is struggling to meet the standard, well, how can we help them get back in tolerance as long as they are willing?
Correct. And when I was in Japan and when I was studying martial arts and all that other stuff, you had the Bushido code, the code of the samurai, and that was honor. You never lost your honor. And it's very true what you said. Shane was when I was a kid, and I remember third grade or whatever, someone dared me to steal a candy bar, and the store owner called me the candy bar. The shame I felt of him walking me over to my mom, to my apartment, and my mom was like, "Your son stole the candy bar." And I never forget how bad I felt. I was like, "Oh, I'll do whatever. Please don't tell my mom. Please don't tell my mom. He dared me, whatever it is, and stuff like that." That shame is what you're talking about. Is basically like, I want to bring my honor back. So what did I
Yeah,
do at
it's
that store?
constructive. It's not to
Correct.
tear it down, but yeah.
Correct. And it was like teaching me a lesson. And that's what the guy did. He said, okay, you're going to come back every day after school and sweep up the floor. And it was getting my honor. He gave me a chance to give me my honor back. And ever since then, it was called like Hollywood Candy Store, whatever, the little corner store in a bodega, whatever it was. And I never forget going back in there. I'm like, and the owner, he was like, okay, come back and I'll give you $1. That week, once a week, I'll give you $1. Making money as in basically, or you wanted candy or whatever it is. He gave me a job. He gave me the opportunity. And that's what you just said. That whole thing of honor. We have to go back to that code of honor as men. And that was the biggest thing. Like, there were no women on the scuba team. And we just had a simple thing. If you pass the test, you can get on. But there's no curves. There's nothing. Because I need you to watch my back like I got to watch your back. I need someone who can do the job. And the physical fitness was a big part of that job. You can't, oh, I'm just tired. Nope. There's no such a thing. We go. That's it. Once we jump out of that helicopter, they're not coming back for us. We got to figure it out, do whatever it is. And I never get in my interview for the scuba test at the chief's office. They're like, well, what makes you so much better than the other candidates? And I said, well, I can jump out of a helicopter. 3 days later, you're going to come back, find me sitting there petting a shark in the middle of the Atlantic. They're like, this is the guy we want. They're like, right, we want this guy. Simple as that. But talking about what you're saying, that honor and code, that comes from the parents. That comes from the father figure saying, hey, your name means something. You want to be something. You want to do more. And I totally believe in positive reinforcement. You did something wrong. I'm going to give you a chance to make it better or make it right, to get you back on the right track. And it gives him that honor back. That's very important for a lot of kids to say, you did something wrong. I'm not going to belittle you, like you said, but here's another chance for you to kind of do better, you know?
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, I always tell my son, anytime I have to have like a negative conversation, like there's always three things that I'm trying to look for that he's done right. So that, I'm not beating him down more than I'm building him up, right? And so that is a great point. But for me, my son, I know he's more perceptive to when I'm angry or I'm impatient, and so I've opened it up to where he can talk to me and say, "Hey, Dad, I feel this way," right? And he's really good at expressing his emotion. But like for me, the place where I've had to work personally is like how I approach things that are negative, because he's a little bit different than my daughter. I can just look at my daughter and it's like she bursts into tears if it's that look, you know what I mean? But my son, like, he's very literal, and so like I have to go through and like spend extra time with him, walking step by step what he did wrong, and then explaining why that's a wrong choice, right? And one of the things I always tell him is you can make a good choice with a good consequence, or a bad choice and you have a bad consequence. So you have to choose whichever one you're going to choose, and you're going to have to face the consequence regardless of your forgiveness or any of those things. There's always going to be something where you have to own the action, right? And so that's one of the things I teach him a lot. But looking back at your life, Oscar, from the streets to the scuba unit to now, like what's one truth that you would tell a young man that would prepare him for maybe being like a dad or a husband in the future?
Every obstacle can be overcome, no matter what. And in order to be a better dad or husband, brother, team member, anything else like that, you got to be honest with yourself. Don't try to be impressive with the knucklehead or the jokes or whatever. Be true to who you are. That's all you need to learn. And everyone always asks that question. What do you know now that you didn't know 10, 20, 30 years ago? And you're like, that one thing is that, oh, I should have been honest with myself. I should have trained more. I should have done this. I should have studied more, things like that. It's like, why didn't you do that? And you're your own worst enemy. I tell it to everyone. You hold yourself back because the woulda, shoulda, coulda, or if I did and whatnot. You always want to put yourself down, not realizing that you can do anything if you achieve it. I explain to everyone. I grew up in foster care. My mother was in prison, and then my grandmother had to raise me. I was homeless. When I first got my apartment, I couldn't afford it, lost my job, and basically had to live in my car for 2 weeks. Paid for college. I'm going to tell everyone this whole thing like student debt relief, whatever. Where were you 50 years ago? You owe me a refund, put ourselves through college. So I tell everyone, every obstacle I went through, for every young man, woman, no matter what, there's always a solution to go over. And I love Bruce Lee's quote, be like water. A water goes over a rock, goes through a forest, goes around a mountain. Be like water. Don't be afraid. Everything. My grandmother had this one great line. When you hit rock bottom, the only way up is up. That's it.
Yep.
And that's it. So I would tell everyone that you're going to have obstacles. You're going to have problems. You're going to have things. Don't be afraid to get help. Seek for some guidance, whether it's a clergyman, a member of a friend or family, whoever it is. Don't be afraid to talk to someone. And don't be afraid to do the work when it comes to work. It's just work. You got to put work into it.
Yeah, you can have all the principles, and if your temptations are stronger than the principle and the wisdom that you know better, and you're not acting on that wisdom, then you're just going to live in regret. Regret is the ghost of, the choices you've buried, right? So, yeah, that is such a good point to be critical about, for sure.
Well, I tell everyone, when I go swimming, quick note, I always say a prayer before I get in the water. I was like, anytime a shark can eat me, this can happen, whatever. I always tell my wife, I joke around with her a lot, but I know that's part of the fact. It's a fact. Something's going to happen, whatever it is. And you make your peace with God. Whether you believe in this or that or whatever it is, you got to be able to believe in yourself and then also keep your faith with yourself. Like, Am I going to get in a ring with Tyson? I have not trained to box. So like, be true to yourself. Nope, I'm not fighting you. Nope, not doing
Yeah,
that at all.
exactly.
It's like, be real, be honest. And that's the whole thing. Goes back to the core principle of people. If everyone was honest with each other, the world would be just such a smooth, easy place. There'd be no animosity. Hey, that's great. You wanted 5 cars and a yacht and whatever it is. Good for you. I don't want that. So don't put me down by making me feel I'm feeling an inferior, living an inferior life because I don't have what you have. And I think that's a big problem, like what you discussed before about social media. That's how it all started with the
Yeah.
Facebook. I'm here and you're not there. I have this and you don't have it, and it made that a natural animosity. And most people are like, I don't care for that. There was nothing better when I was in Brazil, and there was a surfer guy there, and he was like, I was like, oh, do you want to split lunch with me or whatever it is? He's like, no, I got free coconuts. I got, fruit under the tree, something. And he was just so cool, down to earth, like nothing about like a tsunami can happen, a lightning storm. You're like, oh, this is great, man. We got water. Okay, cool. He just flowed with everything. And I just loved that aura he just gave off. He was just like such a cool, chill guy, a little bit
Yeah.
more than I thought, but I'm like, okay, but, having that attitude of believe in yourself. Believe in your capabilities, and don't be afraid to get help when you need help. If you want to talk to people, be honest about it. Don't try and hide or sugarcoat anything or whatever it is. Just be honest.
Absolutely, man. That's really good advice. Thanks for sharing your stories with us tonight. I know you've had quite. We didn't get nearly to talking about it all. Obviously, we'll maybe have to do a part 2 in the future. But I just appreciate your honesty and kind of walking through the things you've been through and what you've learned along the way. What's the best place for people to follow along with you and support what you're doing?
There's every morning I do a LinkedIn post on my LinkedIn, 15-second motivation. So easy, you can go there. It's Oscar Smith or OD Studio. I just tell everyone, if you need help, you need a little guidance or whatever it is, just hit me up. It's real easy. You get me. You don't get a secretary, whatever it is, stuff like that. You get me. So you email me, oman32 or odstudio32 at Gmail. Either one.
Awesome.
So again, way a community grows or people grow is together. That's the key thing. It's all about being together.
Absolutely. And I wanted one final question for you before we wrap is, obviously you had a tough line of work, especially when it comes to marriage. And it sounds like you and your wife were pretty successful at learning how to handle a lot of hardship and have a strong marriage. So through that journey and through the experience, what's something that both you kind of learned along the way that maybe for the younger couples out there, something you wish you would have known beforehand?
Don't let money come between you. Money comes and goes. Money is a big problem with a lot of marriages. And then for guys and girls, thinking the grass is greener on the other side. Everyone always asks me, if you Google my name, Oscar Smith Trainer, you see all the superstars and celebrities I trained and all that other stuff. And everyone asks me, like, how do you deal with all those pretty models, the Victoria's Secret girl, all that other stuff? And I was like, I know just exactly what they are. They're not going to replace my wife. It's like, renting a sports car for a day. It's not that cool. It's not worth that at all. Like when you have your best friend, that's your best friend. That's your best friend for life. And that's what your wife is, your kids are. They're always going to be around you and be there for you. And that's the key thing. You got to keep that in mind. Those other people, they're all hanger-ons. They come and go. It's like flags in the wind. Just blow whichever way it goes.
Yep. Amen. Man, and that's it's such a good point that you raised there too, where as men, right, your wife has the power to completely propel your life in the right direction, right? She can be this amplifying force in your life if you cultivate it, right? So she will respond to your actions as a husband. And so it's so important that you treat her in the right way. And Oscar, like you said, knowing the value of your marriage and defending that, that will give you in return a version of her that is exactly what you need. You've already given us multiple examples through this episode, and just what a beautiful way to end this one, man. I really appreciate that piece of advice. That is very sound advice for all the marriages out there listening to that. So really appreciate it, man. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so
I
much for
appreciate
sharing
it
the
too.
story. And
It's funny because
go for
people
it.
don't understand is that just one quick note. Marriage is work. You got to put that work in. Just know before you say I do and everything else, know that's work. That starts day one and does not end. To death do you part, I truly believe in. You're your best for sickness and health. You're your best friend. Be best friends. Talk, play, laugh. That's very important every day. I always tease my wife. I'm like, oh, I'm going to leave you for so-and-so. And she always goes, good luck with that. That's exactly what she says. Good luck with that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
That's awesome. Yeah,
So I'm
it's
like, all right.
it's work, but it's highly rewarding, and like we said, right? It will pay you dividends as a man, right? Cultivating your marriage with your wife, staying fun, staying light, staying joyful, like when you were dating, continuing to cultivate that and putting the work into that. I think is the ultimate catalyst for everything else. You want to be more successful in business, strengthen your marriage. You want to be better at work, or this or that, strengthen your marriage, because you're going to show up just completely filled and fired up, and you will operate at such a higher level as a man when you've cultivated your marriage. So
Correct.
what a great piece of advice to end, Oscar. It's truly been a pleasure. And with that, dads, let's get back to climbing the mountain of fatherhood. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for everything.
Thanks for watching this episode of the podcast. If you're on YouTube, drop a subscription to us. And if you are listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave us a review. It helps greatly. If you are also ready to level up as a man, check out Elite Sentinel Coaching, our program designed specifically for men, where we forge men into leaders. We turn cowards into kings, weaklings into warriors. Become the hero in your story. Join us today.